It was early morning in the distant village of Quail. The sun had not come out yet. A poor but beautiful young lady named Cheta was walking along a bushy path that led to the village river. She carried a plastic bucket in her hand. Cheta had recently been posted to the village for her NYSC program, where she worked as a teacher in the village secondary school. The village school had given her a small room to manage during her service year. The room had old walls, a weak ceiling fan, and no running water. Every morning before school, she would go to the stream to fetch water for bathing, cooking, and washing. Cheta was beautiful, but her face carried the tiredness of someone trying hard to survive in a place that was not her home. At first, village life had been difficult for her. Back in the city, she had never imagined waking up before sunrise just to carry a bucket of water on her head, but after some weeks, she had no choice but to adjust. Not long after, she arrived at the river. The water waved gently under the early morning breeze. Some women were already there, fetching water before going to the farm. Cheta bent slightly and placed her bucket on the ground, but before she could fetch any water, something caught her attention. A very elderly woman stood close to the riverbank. The woman, who looked weak from age, tried to lift a large clay pot filled with water. Cheta looked at the elderly woman carefully. The pot looked far too heavy for someone her age. Why is this woman carrying something like this alone? Cheta wondered. The elderly woman struggled again to raise the pot. Cheta immediately felt pity for her. She was about to step forward to help when suddenly the clay pot slipped from the elderly woman's hand and shattered on the ground. Water spread everywhere. Pieces of clay scattered near the woman's feet. Cheta became frightened. Oh my goodness. She hurried toward the elderly woman at once. Mama, are you fine? Hope the pot did not injure you. The elderly woman looked down at the broken pieces on the ground. For a moment, she did not speak. Then she said quietly, I'm fine, my daughter. Cheta still looked worried. Please sit down and get a little rest, Mama. The elderly woman moved slowly toward a flat stone near the river and sat down. Cheta looked at her carefully. She could not understand why someone her age would come alone to fetch water. Ma, don't you have anybody at home that can help you? She asked. A child, family member, anybody at all? The elderly woman looked away for a few seconds before answering. No, my daughter. That single word touched Cheta deeply. No? Cheta asked again. Nobody stays with you? The elderly woman gave a tired smile. Yes, my dear, I stay alone. Cheta looked at the broken pot again. The woman had probably struggled all the way from her house only for her pot to break after all that stress. At that moment, Cheta forgot about her own problems. Ma, don't worry, she said. I will help you fetch some water. The elderly woman raised her face. No, my daughter, don't worry yourself. I will find a way. How will you find a way? Cheta asked. You cannot carry anything heavy in this condition. I didn't just want to bother you, my dear. No, I insist, Ma, Cheta replied. Please allow me help you. The elderly woman remained silent. Cheta picked up her bucket and entered the shallow part of the river. She fetched clean water carefully until the bucket became full. After that, she lifted it and turned toward the elderly woman. Show me your house, Mama. The elderly woman looked at her for a moment, wondering who this kind young lady was. Then she stood up slowly with her walking stick. Come, she said. The walk to the woman's house was not short. They passed through a lonely part of the village where very few people lived. After some time, they finally arrived at a small hut standing alone, surrounded by trees and overgrown grasses. Outside the hut was a very large clay pot used for storing water. From the look of it, the elderly woman had been trying to fill it little by herself. Cheta looked at the large pot and the water in it in disbelief. This is what you have been fetching alone? The elderly woman gave a weak smile. My daughter, I don't have any choice. Water will not fetch itself. Cheta felt pain in her heart hearing that. Without saying another word, she carried the bucket and emptied the water into the large clay pot. Then she went back again to fetch more water, and again until the large pot became full to the brim. By the time she finished, sweat covered her face despite the cold morning air. The elderly woman looked at her with gratitude in her eyes. Thank you, my daughter, she said. May God bless you for helping an old woman like me. Cheta smiled. It is nothing, Ma. Anybody would do the same. The elderly woman looked at her quietly. After a moment, the woman spoke again. Forgive my manners. I did not even tell you my name. Cheta smiled again. My name is Adaku, the elderly woman said. Mine is Cheta. Cheta replied, smiling. Cheta, the elderly woman repeated slowly, as if trying to remember the name carefully. Cheta looked around the compound again. The place looked too lonely. Mama, You mean nobody stays with you here? She asked. Not even a family member? Mama Adaku adjusted the edge of her wrapper. Well, I have a son, she replied. But he lives in the city. Cheta became quiet. Somehow, that answer made her feel even more sad for the elderly woman. She had heard stories of many elderly parents in the village who are suffering alone while their children stayed far away, chasing money in the city. Cheta understood that kind of situation very well. Then she looked at her wristwatch. Her eyes widened immediately. Ah! She almost forgot she had school that morning. I am late. She picked up her empty bucket quickly. Mama, I have to go now. I need to get to school ASAP. The elderly woman looked at her. Cheta continued, but I will come back this evening to check on you. For the first time since they met, Mama Adaku's face changed slightly. It was almost as if those words meant more to her than the water itself. You will come back? Mama Adaku asked. Yes, Cheta answered. I promise. Then she hurried out of the compound and disappeared into the narrow path. Mama Adaku remained standing outside her hut, watching the direction Cheta had gone, thinking and wondering about the young lady who had just helped her. It was a rare kind of help. At school that morning, Cheta's mind kept going back to the elderly woman she met at the riverbank. She kept asking herself questions. How was she able to live alone in that isolated hut? Who helps her when she is sick? Cheta felt pain in her heart. She thought maybe her son might just be a struggling young man in the city. Maybe life was hard for him too. Maybe he was not in the right position to make life easier for his mother at the moment. But even with those thoughts, Cheta could not understand why an elderly woman should suffer alone like that. Later that evening, after closing hours, Cheta started walking back to her small room near the school. As she walked, she thought about the elderly woman again. Once I get some rest, I'll go check up on Mama Adaku. Maybe she might need my help for something. That thought stayed in her mind. When she reached her room, she opened the door and stepped inside. She freshened up and had lunch. After that, she left her room and headed straight to the elderly woman's house. When she arrived, Mama Adaku was sitting outside her small hut. The evening air was calm. The area was quiet. The elderly woman was staring into the distance like someone lost in deep thought. Cheta stopped at a short distance. Good evening, Mama, she greeted. Mama Adaku turned toward her. Good evening, my daughter, she replied. You came back. Cheta walked closer. Yes, Mama. I told you I was going to come. The elderly woman pointed gently to a small space beside her. Please, my daughter, sit. Then Cheta sat down and said, Mama, I hope you're fine. Do you need anything? Mama Adaku replied, I am fine. And thank you again for what you did this morning. Cheta smiled. It was nothing, Ma. There was silence again. Then Cheta spoke with a calm voice. Mama, I hope you don't mind if I come here every evening after work. Mama Adaku looked at her carefully. Every evening? Yes, Cheta said. I will help you fetch water. I will help you clean your house. If you want to cook, I will help you cook too. I will come after work every evening. Mama Adaku's face changed. She looked surprised. My daughter, are you sure? That is too much work for you, Cheta answered quickly. I'm sure. Please do not refuse me. I want to help you as much as I can before I finish my youth service. Mama Adaku stayed quiet for a moment with mixed emotions. Then she asked, Why are you doing this for me? That question lingered in the air. Cheta looked down for a short moment before speaking. I lost my parents at a young age, she said. I grew up alone. I had to work and struggle to go to school by myself. Her voice became lower. I know what it feels like to stay all alone in this house. Oh, my daughter, I'm so sorry about your parents. It must have been hard growing up alone, the elderly woman said. It was hard, Mama. But I learned to live with it. I'm fine now, Cheta said before continuing. So, when you said that you stay alone, that you had no one to help you around the house, I could not walk away. I knew I had to come around any time I'm free to help in any little way I can. My daughter, I don't even know what to say. You have shown me kindness I did not expect. May God bless you, the elderly woman said. Cheta gave a small, simple smile. That evening, Cheta did not leave quickly. She stayed outside with Mama Adaku. They shared stories about small things, about the village, about life, about simple memories, and as the night slowly became dark, something began to form between them. A quiet connection. From that day it became a routine. Every evening after school, Cheta would go straight to Mama Adaku's hut. Some days she fetched water from the river for her. Other days, she swept the compound, washed plates, and arranged little things inside the hut. Sometimes she even cooked for the elderly woman, and through it all, Cheta never complained. Even after spending the whole day teaching in school, she still came every evening with the same calm face. Mama Adaku noticed everything. She noticed how tired Cheta sometimes looked after work. She noticed the old pair of shoes Cheta wore almost every day. It was clear the young lady was struggling too. But somehow Cheta still found space in her heart to care for someone else. That alone touched Mama Adaku deeply. One evening, after Cheta finished fetching water, Mama Adaku looked at her and said, "My daughter, you're doing too much for me." Cheta smiled. "It is not too much, Mama. But you go to school every day to teach. You still come here to help me around the house." Cheta placed the bucket she was carrying down. "You also need help, Mama. At this age, you should not be carrying water from the stream. At least not while I'm still in this village." Mama Adaku looked at her quietly with a smile. That evening, after having dinner, both of them sat outside the hut on an old wooden bench. The night breeze moved gently through the trees. Crickets could be heard from nearby bushes. Mama Adaku began telling stories. Stories from many years ago. She told Cheta about her younger days in the village. Back then, the village was full of life. There were festivals almost every season. People visited one another freely. Children played outside under the moonlight without fear. Cheta listened. Sometimes she laughed at the stories. Sometimes she became quiet. One night, Mama Adaku spoke about her late husband. "He was a strong man," she said. "Everybody in this village knew him." "He must have been a very respected man," Mama Cheta said. "Yes, he was. He was a good man, very hard-working and kind," Mama Adaku said with a smile. Then the story continued for a while with both of them sharing quiet moments and gentle conversation under the night breeze. Eventually, it was time for Cheta to leave. She stood up slowly and adjusted her clothes. "Mama, I should be going now," Cheta said softly. "It's getting late." Mama Adaku nodded gently. "All right, my daughter. Good night, Mama. Sleep well." "Good night, my daughter," Mama Adaku replied warmly. But what Cheta did not know was that her genuine kindness to the elderly woman would soon lead her to someone who would change her life completely. The beautiful relationship between Cheta and Mama Adaku grew stronger with each passing day, becoming a source of deep comfort for the lonely elderly woman. One evening, Cheta walked along the bushy road that led to Mama Adaku's hut. School had closed early that day, and there was going to be a public holiday the next day. Cheta carried a small bag in one hand as she made her way toward Mama Adaku's hut. As usual, when she arrived, she helped the elderly woman around the house. When she was done, Mama Asku thanked her as usual. As they sat side by side outside the hut, Mama Asku suddenly said, "My daughter, I may not be around tomorrow." Cheta looked at her in surprise. "You're going somewhere, Mama?" "Yes," Mama Adaku replied gently. "If you don't mind me asking, where are you going, Ma?" Cheta asked, wondering how the frail old woman would journey alone. "My son called me. He said he'll be visiting the village soon," Mama Adaku replied. Cheta smiled warmly, feeling a sense of relief for her. "That is very good news, Ma. At least you will get to see him." Mama Adaku nodded with a soft smile and continued, "So, tomorrow I want to go and clean his house before he arrives." Cheta was genuinely surprised to hear this. "His house here in the village, Mama?" "Yes, my dear," the old woman responded. Cheta became curious immediately. She knew Mama Adaku had a son in the city and that they spoke on the phone sometimes, but Mama Adaku hardly spoke much about him. The only thing she always said was that he left the village many years ago in search of a better life. This was the first time Cheta was hearing that her son actually had a house right here in the village. Still, one major thing worried her deeply. She looked at Mama Adaku's weak frame carefully. "Mama, you want to clean a whole house by yourself? In your condition?" Mama Adaku smiled faintly, her eyes showing a mother's stubborn devotion. "I will try, my daughter." Cheta almost laughed in disbelief, shaking her head. "No, Mama, how will you do that kind of heavy work alone? It is not possible. I've actually done it several times, though my son doesn't like the fact that I always insist on doing so. He prefers to pay some young people to clean it when he arrives," Mama Adaku said, with a gentle smile. "But this is different, Mama," Cheta replied firmly. "Even fetching water alone already makes you tired. I cannot allow you to go and strain yourself." Mama Adaku patted her hand. "It will be fine, my dear." Cheta refused immediately, her kind heart completely unwilling to let the elderly woman suffer. "No, Ma, I will go with you." Mama Adaku looked at her with wide eyes. "My daughter, you do not need to stress yourself. You're already doing more than enough for me." "I insist, Mama," Cheta said, packing up her things. "Tomorrow is a public holiday, so I have all the time in the world. Please do not refuse me." The old woman looked at her with immense appreciation. "My daughter, thank you. You are truly a blessing to me. I don't take your kindness for granted." The next morning, Cheta followed Mama Adaku as they walked through another part of the village she had never entered before. Mama Adaku walked carefully, leaning heavily on her walking stick, while Cheta stayed closely beside her to ensure she did not stumble. Soon they entered a wider path surrounded by beautifully trimmed bushes on both sides. But unlike the lonely, desolate area near Mama Adaku's hut, this place had massive modern houses. Some even had high-painted fences and solar streetlights. Cheta looked around with immense surprise, her jaw dropping slightly. "This side of the village looks completely different, Mama," she said. "Yes, this is where the rich people in this community live," Mama Adaku answered calmly. They continued walking down the smooth road. Then, after some time, Mama Adaku stopped in front of a magnificent, heavy modern gate. Cheta slowly raised her eyes, completely stunned. The compound behind the gate was massive. It was a breathtaking mansion, incredibly beautiful and luxurious. Cheta became utterly speechless, wondering if they had stopped at the wrong place. But to her shock, Mama Adaku brought out a set of keys, unlocked the small gate entry, pushed it open, and entered. Cheta stood outside for a second, completely paralyzed by confusion, before following her inside. The compound was neat and pristine, with expensive flowers lining the elegant walkway. The house itself looked extremely modern and fresh, like an architectural masterpiece owned by a multimillionaire. Cheta could hardly believe her eyes as Mama Adaku opened the main front door. Inside the mansion, the furniture, the heavy curtains, the glittering chandeliers, and everything else looked incredibly expensive. Cheta kept looking around in absolute disbelief, her mind racing. Many questions filled her head. How can Mama Adaku's son own a massive palace like this? If he is this wealthy, why on earth is his mother still living in a broken mud hut? Why is she still fetching water from the muddy stream every morning? The more she thought about it, the more confused and slightly disturbed she became, wondering if the son was a wicked, ungrateful man who neglected his mother. Still, she kept her thoughts to herself and respected the old woman's privacy. Both of them started cleaning the house. Cheta, full of youthful energy, took over the heaviest tasks. She dusted the luxurious chairs and marble tables, brushed the spacious bedrooms, and meticulously cleaned the large glass windows. Meanwhile, Mama Adaku arranged small decorative items around the house carefully, smiling as she watched Cheta work so selflessly. Hours later, after they finished cleaning the entire mansion, both of them sat down to rest inside the cool, large living room. Cheta looked around once more, and the burning question inside her mind simply refused to leave. Finally, she gathered the courage to speak. "Mama, if you don't mind, can I ask you a serious question?" "You can ask me anything, my daughter, Mama," Adaku replied warmly. Cheta looked at her directly and said, "If your son has a beautiful house like this, why are you still living in that small old hut? And why are you still suffering yourself at the stream every morning when there is running water and absolute comfort in this house?" The room became intensely quiet for a moment. Mama Adaku looked around the lavish living room, sighing softly. "Daughter, I understand your concerns. Many people in the village also ask me the same question, thinking my son abandons me. In fact, my son Chuba has tried everything humanly possible to make me stay here. He begged me, he cried. I even threatened to lock up the hut." She paused briefly, adjusting her wrapper slightly before continuing. "I have also tried to stay here to please him, but I simply cannot. The house is far too big, too empty, and too lonely for me, especially whenever my son returns to the city for his business. I am an old village woman. I am not used to such haunting silence. Another reason is that I am deeply attached to my hut. That humble place holds all the beautiful memories of my late husband, and I have grown used to my simple life and routine there. It is where my heart belongs." She looked at Cheta gently and placed her warm hand over Cheta's. "And about the stream? This mansion is actually much farther from my hut than the stream is. I've been going to that stream since I was a young bride. It keeps my old bones moving. It is what I am used to, my dear." Cheta felt a wave of understanding wash over her, realizing she had misjudged the situation. "I understand now, Mama. I didn't think about it that way. I am sorry for questioning it." A few days later, Mama Adaku sat outside her old hut, on her familiar wooden bench, staring into the distance. Suddenly, the deep, heavy sound of a powerful vehicle approached the quiet, isolated area. It was highly unusual, as cars hardly ever came to this side of the village. Soon, a luxurious brand-new black Hilux truck appeared on the dusty road, kicking up dust before stopping right in front of Mama Adaku's compound. The old woman's face brightened instantly. She already knew who it was. "My son," she whispered with joy. The driver's door swung open, and a tall, handsome, and impeccably dressed young man stepped out of the truck. It was Chuba. The moment he saw his mother, his face lit up with pure love and he hurried toward her. Mama! Mama Adaku stood up from the bench at once, her arms wide open. Chuba, my son. The young man reached her and pulled her into a tight, emotional hug. For a moment neither of them spoke, enjoying the reunion. My son, I have missed you so much, Mama Adaku said, wiping a joyful tear. I missed you too, Mama, Chuba replied, holding her shoulders and looking at her with a bright smile. Standing quietly behind them was a young woman who had just stepped out from the passenger side of the truck. She was elegantly dressed in very expensive designer clothes, heavily made up, and looked extremely polished, though her expression seemed a bit detached as she looked at the humble mud hut. The woman walked toward them, adjusting her dark sunglasses. Good evening, Mama, she greeted with a rehearsed sweetness. Mama Adaku looked at her, surprised. Good evening, my daughter. Chuba smiled proudly. Mama, this is Delucci. Mama Adaku's eyes widened slightly. The Delucci you always talk about on the phone? Yes, Mama, Chuba answered, wrapping an arm around the lady's waist. She is my fiancée. I brought her to finally meet you. Mama Adaku's face brightened immediately. Ah, that is wonderful news. She is very beautiful. Welcome, my daughter. Delucci smiled politely, though she carefully stepped around a patch of dirt to avoid ruining her expensive shoes. It is nice to finally meet you, Mama. Mama Adaku looked incredibly happy. So, this is the woman who has captured my son's heart. Chuba laughed happily, formally introducing them properly. Yes, Mama, this is Delucci. Delucci, this is my wonderful mother. Delucci greeted her again and Mama Adaku welcomed her with open arms. Just then, someone approached the compound with a large bucket of water balanced perfectly on her head. It was Cheta. She had gone to fetch the final round of water for Mama Adaku before Chuba's arrival. The moment she approached the group, she lowered her eyes out of respect and greeted them politely. Good evening, sir. Good evening, Ma. Good evening, Mama. Mama Adaku answered with immense warmth. Welcome, my daughter. Thank you so much. Chuba and his fiancée greeted her too, though Delucci looked at Cheta's simple attire and wet slippers with a hint of disdain. Cheta quickly walked to the back of the house, poured the water into the large reservoir pot to fill it to the brim, and returned to the front. Cheta approached them with a calm, humble smile. I am done filling the water, Mama. Do you need anything else before I leave? Mama Daku looked at her with intense satisfaction and pride. No, my daughter, you have done more than enough already. Please stay for a moment. She then turned to her son, Chuba. Chuba, my son, look at her very well. This is Cheta, the exceptional young lady I told you about on the phone. The one who has been taking care of me out of the pure kindness of her heart. She doesn't allow me to lift a single heavy thing. She is exactly like the daughter I never had. Respectful, honest, and very hard-working young woman. She is truly a godsend to me. Mama Adaku then turned to Cheta. My daughter, this is my only child, Chuba. Cheta smiled softly throughout the glowing introduction, feeling slightly shy but genuinely happy for the old woman. Chuba stood up, genuinely impressed, and stretched out his hand toward her. They shook hands warmly. It is an absolute pleasure to meet you, Cheta. My mother has told me so much about your selflessness on the phone. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for always being there for her when I am so far away, Chuba said with sincere admiration. Cheta smiled gently and replied, It's nice to meet you too, Mr. Chuba. Your mother is very dear to me. I'm just happy I could help her. She means a lot to me now. Thank you once again, Chuba said, as he sat back down. Then Cheta turned to Mama Adaku. Mama, I think I should start going home now so you can spend quality time with your family. All right, my daughter. Go well, Mama Adaku replied warmly. As Cheta turned and began walking back down the dusty path, Chuba turned to his mother and fiancée. Mama, please let us carry your small bags. We are all moving over to the main mansion right now. I cannot let you sleep in this hut while I am in the village. A few minutes later, the three of them entered the air-conditioned black Hilux truck, leaving the humble compound behind. When they arrived at the grand mansion and everyone settled in, the stark contrast between the two young women began to show itself in a very ugly way. After a while, Mama Adaku walked into the lavish living room where Delucci was seated alone, completely absorbed in her iPhone. The old woman sat beside her, trying to bond and catch up with her future daughter-in-law. She asked friendly questions about life in the bustling city, about her family background, and her career, simply trying to get to know her better. Meanwhile, Chuba had gone into his private master bedroom to answer some urgent international business calls. After a long conversation, Mama Adaku stood up, stretching her old back. My daughter, it is getting late. We should start preparing food for dinner. The kitchen is fully stocked. Delucci slowly raised her face from her phone, looking slightly annoyed by the interruption. Mama Adaku continued with a smile. I do not know how to use all these modern gas cookers and electronic appliances in this house. What do you people call them again? But you are a modern city girl, I believe you know how to operate them very well. Come, let us go to the kitchen and cook a beautiful meal together. But Delucci replied with a cold, shocking statement that Mama Adaku never expected in her entire life. I don't cook, Mama, she said casually, returning her eyes to her phone screen. Mama Adaku stared at her, utterly frozen and shocked to her very core. You do not cook at all, my daughter? Yes, Delucci answered plainly and without a shred of shame. I do not know how to cook and I don't intend to learn. It ruins my skin and hair. The elderly woman was completely speechless, her mind struggling to process what she had just heard. In Mama Adaku's traditional generation, the very first thing a mother teaches her daughter is how to prepare a good meal for her family. How could a fully grown woman about to get married look an elder in the eye and proudly say she does not know how to cook? Who raised this child? The old woman wondered in deep distress. She looked at Delucci again, but the young woman completely ignored her, scrolling through social media as if she hadn't just said something deeply disrespectful. The disappointed elderly woman turned quietly and walked toward Chuba's room. She knocked and found her son just finishing his phone call. Chuba, she called out seriously. Yes, Mama, is everything okay? Chuba asked. Mama Adaku looked at him with an intense frown. The woman you brought home, the one you say you want to marry, just told me to my face that she doesn't know how to cook a single thing. Chuba looked surprised for only a brief second. Then he chuckled softly, dismissing his mother's deep concern. Honestly, Mama, I never really noticed. We always eat out or order delivery. Mama Adaku frowned even deeper, hurt by his casual attitude. You never noticed? A woman you want to build a home with? Mama, please understand that I am always extremely busy with business. Chuba explained patiently. I have highly paid domestic workers in the city who handle all the cooking and cleaning in my apartment. It is really nothing for you to worry about. We both have high-paying jobs and we can easily afford a chef. Mama Adaku kept looking at him, a heavy weight sinking into her heart. What surprised and troubled her the most was not even Delucci's lack of skills, but the fact that her son seemed completely unbothered by such a fundamental flaw. Then Mama Adaku explained her immediate predicament. I wanted us to have a fresh, healthy homemade meal tonight, my son, but I do not know how to use these complicated gas cylinders and modern cookers safely. I thought your fiancé would help me. Chuba replied calmly, trying to please her. Mama, please do not stress your beautiful self over food. He stood up immediately, picked up his luxury car keys, and left the house. About an hour later, Chuba returned from the nearby city, carrying several large plastic packs of expensive cooked food from a high-end continental restaurant. He had bought various types of rice, heavily spiced, soups, meats, chicken, and different carbonated drinks. He set the lavish spread on the grand dining table, calling everyone to eat. They all sat down, but the moment Mama Adaku tasted the food, she felt uncomfortable. It was far too oily, artificial, and spicy for an old woman. She quietly carried her plate and walked down the long hallway to her bedroom, preferring to eat in isolation. Inside her room, dark and heavy thoughts filled her mind, worrying deeply about the kind of home her son was about to build. When Mama Adaku was done eating, she carried her empty plate and stepped out of her room to wash it. As she walked past the massive dining area toward the kitchen, a shocking sight stopped her dead in her tracks. The grand dining table was completely covered in a chaotic mess of dirty plates, empty plastic packs, used napkins, and half-filled cups. Nobody had cleared a single thing after eating. The mess was left there carelessly, as if some invisible servant was expected to magically appear and clean up after them. Mama Adaku turned her eyes toward the open living room. Chuba was lying down comfortably on the long couch, watching a live football match on the massive television screen. Delucci sat right beside him, completely unbothered, still pressing her phone and laughing loudly at something on her screen. The elderly woman became incredibly confused and deeply irritated. At first, she tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, thinking maybe they had simply forgotten, so she quietly walked into the kitchen, washed only the single plate she had used, and returned to her room, deciding to leave the rest to see if Delucci would show any sense of responsibility. Hours passed by. Late that night, around midnight, Mama Adaku came out of her room again to fetch a glass of water. The very first thing that caught her eye was the dining table. The dirty plates, flies now circling them, were still sitting there exactly the same way they had been left hours ago. At that point, the traditional old woman could no longer suppress her anger and keep quiet. She walked over to the living room and stood directly in front of DeLucci. "My daughter," she said, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "Is this truly how you behave in your own home?" DeLucci looked up from her phone, startled and visibly annoyed by the confrontation. Mama Adaku continued, pointing at the mess. "You finished eating hours ago and left everything rotting on the table. You did not even think for a second to clear the table, let alone wash the plates. Is that how a woman behaves?" DeLucci answered with an incredibly arrogant tone, looking at her freshly manicured hands. "Mama, I did not want my expensive nails to get wet or ruined." Mama Adaku looked utterly bewildered. "Your what?" "My fixed acrylic nails," DeLucci explained rudely, raising her long, painted extensions slightly in the old woman's face. "The dishwater and soap will completely spoil them, and they cost a fortune." For a terrifying moment, Mama Adaku did not even know what to say to such profound vanity. She slowly turned her piercing gaze toward her son. "Chuba," she called out, her voice dropping to a dangerous low. "Yes, Mama," Chuba replied, his eyes still glued to the television match, completely oblivious to the brewing storm. Mama Adaku's voice was rock-hard as she spoke. "You heard exactly what your wife-to-be just said to me." Chuba, wanting to avoid drama, kept his eyes on the screen and dismissed his mother yet again. "Mama, please, I beg you. Do not stress yourself over trivial things. I will clear the table myself after the first half of this match is over. Just let me enjoy the game." Mama Adaku looked at her son with deep sorrow and immense disappointment. He was completely blinded by this woman's superficial beauty. Without saying another word, the elderly mother walked over to the dining table herself. With tears of hurt swelling in her old eyes, she gathered all the heavy dirty plates and spent the next 30 minutes washing everything alone in the dark kitchen. Meanwhile, DeLucci smirked, looking over at the kitchen, and thought to herself maliciously, "Does this old villager really expect me to ruin my thousands of naira nails for her? Never in this life. She needs to know her place." That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Mama Adaku stayed awake for a very long time, staring into the dark ceiling of her luxury room. A deep, agonizing fear entered her heart for the future of her lineage. She desperately wanted her only son to build a stable, respectful home. She wanted grandchildren who would be raised with proper African values, discipline, and humility. But after the horrific attitude she had witnessed today, she knew danger lay ahead. This incident marked the beginning of a bitter conflict, a trial of values where the modern, arrogant antagonist would begin to view the innocent, kind-hearted protagonist, Cheta, as a mortal threat to her gold-digging plans, setting off a chain of events that would turn everyone's lives completely upside down. The next morning, Mama Adaku stood alone inside her room, her mind heavy with the disturbing events of the previous night. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the arrogant smirk on DeLucci's face and heard her son's dismissive excuses. To make matters worse, the heavily spiced restaurant food from the night before was causing her stomach great discomfort. She craved a simple, healthy, properly cooked homemade meal. But looking at the sleek, complicated digital gas cooker in the mansion's modern kitchen, she felt utterly helpless. DeLucci did not know how to cook, and Chuba was completely blind to the brewing crisis. Standing there, a sudden wave of warmth washed over the old woman's heart as a specific face came to her mind. Cheta, the compassionate young teacher who had selflessly filled her water pots without ever asking for a single thing in return. Mama Adaku desperately wanted to call her immediately, but she checked the time and remembered that Cheta would be at the village secondary school teaching her students. She decided to endure the long, uncomfortable day and wait until evening. All through the day, Mama Adaku sat quietly, watching the hours tick away. DeLucci remained glued to the couch, completely ignoring her future mother-in-law, while Chuba took various business calls in his room. Finally, as the evening sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the village, Mama Adaku picked up her phone with trembling fingers and dialed Cheta's number. The phone rang only a few times before Cheta's cheerful, respectful voice came through the speaker. "Good evening, Mama. I hope you are resting well." Hearing that gentle voice brought immediate relief to the old woman's heart. "Good evening, my wonderful daughter," Mama Adaku replied, her voice filled with deep emotion. Cheta smiled warmly on the other end of the line. Mama, I was actually thinking of coming over to the mansion to check on you today. But I thought to myself that I should give you some privacy to spend some quality time in his new fiancée. Mama Adaku immediately cut in, her tone turning incredibly serious. Do not ever say such a thing, my daughter. You will always be welcome in my life, no matter the time or the day. You have earned a permanent place in my heart, Cheta. Cheta was deeply touched by those words, her eyes swelling with gratitude. Mama Adaku then lowered her voice slightly. Please, my dear, if you are free, come over to the mansion this evening. I need you. Cheta sensed the underlying distress in the old woman's voice. I will be there right away, Mama. Not long after, Cheta arrived at the grand gates of the mansion. She walked inside and entered the massive living room, instantly bowing her head out of deep cultural respect. Good evening, sir. Good evening, Ma. Good evening, Mama, she greeted everyone politely. Chuba stood up with a warm, welcoming smile. Ah, Cheta, good evening. Welcome. DeLucci, however, barely glanced up from her phone, offering a cold, practically silent nod before completely turning her back. Mama Adaku immediately stood up from her seat, grabbed Cheta's hand, and led her straight into her private bedroom, closing the door firmly behind them. The moment they sat down on the edge of the bed, the elderly woman poured her heart out, her face showing intense frustration. My daughter, you will simply not believe the kind of humiliation and laziness I witnessed in this house yesterday. Cheta looked at her with genuine concern. What happened, Mama? Please tell me. Mama Adaku explained everything in meticulous detail. She described how DeLucci had proudly declared that she could not cook a single meal, how Chuba had driven all the way to the city just to buy heavily processed restaurant food, and how the dining table had been left in a filthy state for hours because DeLucci feared ruining her expensive synthetic nails. As the old woman complained bitterly about her mouth almost catching fire from the spicy food, Cheta could not help but smile gently, trying to calm her down. Mama, please do not be too angry. To be honest, that is how many modern women and wealthy people live their lives in the big city. They rely entirely on restaurants and house helps. Mama Adaku looked absolutely shocked and disgusted by the revelation. But who raised them to be so utterly useless? How can a fully grown woman live in a home and lack basic, fundamental human survival skills? It is a total shame. Cheta tried her best to suppress a chuckle, comforting her. Mama Adaku sighed, pointing toward the kitchen. Chuba even filled the entire freezer with those plastic food packs. But my old stomach cannot take it. I want fresh, healthy, simple food today. The problem is, I am terrified of that electronic gas cooker. I don't know how to turn it on without risking an explosion. Cheta smiled beautifully, standing up and patting the old woman's shoulder. That one is very easy, Mama. Do not worry at all. I will gladly cook a fresh, delicious traditional meal for everyone tonight. The elderly woman's face lit up with pure joy and hope. Ah, may the Almighty God bless your beautiful soul, my child. Come, let us go to the kitchen immediately. The two women walked into the pristine, state-of-the-art kitchen. Cheta moved around the space with absolute grace, efficiency, and natural confidence. She washed the fresh vegetables, sliced the ingredients perfectly, and operated the modern appliances seamlessly. Mama Adaku stayed right by her side, happily assisting with small tasks like washing the fish, her eyes filled with absolute satisfaction as she watched Cheta work so selflessly. Within 45 minutes, the rich, mouth-watering aroma of fresh, traditional home-cooked soup and pounded yam began to waft through the massive halls of the mansion. The scent was incredibly inviting, carrying the true essence of a loving home. Inside his bedroom, Chuba suddenly stopped talking on his business call. His nostrils flared as the delicious aroma hit him. He dropped his phone, completely mesmerized. He stepped out into the living room, looking around in utter surprise. He walked over to DeLucci, who was still aggressively scrolling through her phone. Who is cooking that amazing food? Chuba asked, his mouth watering. DeLucci barely looked up, her tone dripping with annoyance. I don't know. Your mother and that village girl are in the kitchen. Chuba, driven by hunger and nostalgia, walked toward the dining area just as Mama Adaku and Cheta brought out the final steaming bowls of food, arranging the table beautifully. Everyone sat down to eat. The moment Chuba took his very first bite of the fresh meal, he froze in absolute shock. His eyes widened and he looked up immediately. My goodness, who cooked this incredible food? Mama Adaku smiled with immense pride, looking directly at Cheta. Cheta cooked it entirely by herself from scratch. The elderly mother then began to praise Cheta openly and aggressively, making sure her voice echoed through the dining room. This girl is the definition of a true woman. She is respectful, she is exceptionally hardworking, she is brilliant, and she can cook absolute magic. She has proper home training. Mama Adaku emphasized those words with intense strength, deliberately ensuring that every single syllable stabbed into Delucci's ears. Delucci understood the silent warfare immediately. She knew without a doubt that those harsh words were a direct attack on her own laziness and vanity. She gripped her fork tightly, a dark, venomous anger swirling in her eyes, but she forced herself to remain quiet. Chuba looked at Cheta with a profound sense of real admiration for the very first time. Well done, Cheta. This food is absolutely phenomenal. To be completely honest with you all, I have not eaten a proper, authentic homemade meal since I arrived in this village. Cheta lowered her head shyly, a humble smile gracing her lips. I just tried my best to make sure Mama was comfortable, sir. I am just happy to help in any way I can. Meanwhile, Delucci remained completely silent at the table, refusing to praise the food, though she ate it greedily. Inside her twisted heart, a dangerous, dark jealousy began to take root. Hearing Mama Adaku constantly compare her to a common village teacher made her blood boil. The old woman kept going, totally unstoppable. Cheta helps me every single day without a single complaint. She fetches water, she sweeps my compound, she cooks, she washes, she possesses a pure, honest, and golden heart. Good character like hers is an absolute rarity these days. Cheta smiled softly. Mama, please, I am only doing what is right and natural. But Mama Adaku insisted loudly, keep doing it, my daughter. Karma and God will surely reward you. Delucci's face turned visibly ugly with hidden rage. That night, after a wonderful dinner, Cheta packed her small bag and prepared to walk back to her school quarters. Mama Adaku held her hand tightly, genuinely wishing she could stay. My beautiful daughter, why not just sleep here in one of the luxury guest rooms tonight? The path is dark. Cheta smiled apologetically, shaking her head gently. No, Mama, thank you so much for the offer. I have to be at school very early tomorrow morning to prepare my lesson notes for the students. But I promise I will come back every evening to check on you and help cook fresh meals. Mama Adaku smiled warmly, letting go of her hand reluctantly. All right, my daughter, go safely. As Cheta stepped out of the mansion and disappeared into the quiet village night, Delucci sat alone in the dim light of the living room, her eyes burning with pure malice. The way Mama Adaku had weaponized Cheta's goodness to humiliate her kept playing over and over in her mind like a broken record. She noticed the subtle way Chuba had looked at Cheta with deep respect and admiration. A terrifying realization hit her. This poor, simple village schoolteacher was a massive threat to her position as the future wife of a multimillionaire. If I don't eliminate this girl from this family quickly, Delucci whispered to herself viciously, she will ruin everything I have worked so hard to gain. I must destroy her reputation completely. From that fateful night, a routine was established. Every single evening, Cheta would faithfully visit the mansion after her grueling hours at the school. She would clean, she would cook fresh traditional meals, and she would spend hours in Mama Adaku's room, sharing deep laughter and comforting stories. The old woman began to rely on Cheta's presence as if she were her own flesh and blood. And quietly from the shadows, Chuba began observing Cheta with an increasingly sharp intensity. He noticed how she never complained about being tired, how she naturally respected everyone, and how she carried herself with an unspoken, graceful dignity. He also noticed her impeccable speech. Whenever she contributed to a conversation, she spoke with immense intelligence, clarity, and deep administrative logic. One sunny afternoon, while Delucci was away in the city shopping, Mama Adaku called Chuba into the main living room. Chuba, my only son, come and sit down. I want to have a very important discussion with you. Chuba walked in calmly, sitting opposite his mother. What is it, Mama? I hope your health is perfectly fine. Mama Adaku looked incredibly serious, her eyes boring into his. It is about that girl, Cheta. She is a rare gem, Chuba. She is respectful, she is incredibly hardworking, and she is highly intelligent. I have been speaking with her, and I found out something amazing. When her NYSC service year finishes in a few months, I want you to do something major for her. Chuba stayed quiet, listening intently. What do you want me to do, Mama? I want you to give her a high-paying job in your massive multi-million naira company in the city, the old woman said firmly. Chuba remained completely silent for a moment, weighing the request. Mama Adaku pushed harder. You can see with your own eyes how hard she is struggling to survive alone in this world. A brilliant girl with such an impeccable, pure character should never be allowed to suffer or wander the streets jobless. Please, my son, promise me you will give her a chance. Chuba took a deep breath looking at his mother's pleading eyes. After thinking quietly for a few moments, he finally nodded. I will deeply consider it, Mama. Let her finish her service year first. Mama Adaku became immensely happy, praying for him. Days passed into weeks, and the time for Chuba and Delucci to return to the bustling city finally drew close. One evening, right after Cheta had finished preparing dinner, Chuba called her out privately. Cheta, please, can we walk out to the garden for a moment? I need to speak with you. Cheta looked quite surprised, but answered politely, Yes, of course, sir. They walked out into the beautifully manicured garden, the evening breeze blowing softly. For a few seconds, Chuba remained quiet, admiring her calm demeanor. Then he spoke sincerely. First of all, Cheta, I want to formally thank you from the depth of my soul. Cheta looked utterly confused. Thank me, sir? For what exactly? For everything you have done for my elderly mother, Chuba replied, looking at her directly. You have been incredibly kind, loving and patient with her when absolutely nobody was watching or forcing you. You did it out of pure humanity. Honestly, people like you are extremely rare in this modern world. Cheta felt a deep blush creep up her face, lowering her eyes shyly. It is absolutely nothing, sir. It is my duty to help the elderly. No, it is not nothing, Chuba insisted gently. Then, shifting his tone to a professional one, he asked, Tell me, Cheta, what exactly did you study at the university before being posted here for your youth service? Cheta answered quietly, I studied business administration, sir. Chuba looked instantly interested, his business mind clicking. Oh, that's impressive. What class of degree did you graduate with? Cheta hesitated for a second, then answered modestly, I graduated with a first-class honors, sir. Chuba completely froze in absolute astonishment. A first class? In business administration? From a top university? Yes, sir, she replied softly. The more Chuba listened to her articulate her university experience, the more profoundly impressed and blown away he became. He realized she wasn't just a kind village girl. She was a certified genius who was heavily underutilized. He smiled brightly. That is an extraordinary achievement, Cheta. He took a step closer. I am officially offering you a top managerial position in my corporate headquarters once your NYSC service year is completed in a few months. Cheta completely froze, her heart hammering against her chest. She could hardly believe her ears. Job, sir, in your company? Yes, Chuba laughed warmly. The salary is extremely high, with massive benefits, and I believe a brilliant mind like yours deserves a grand opportunity to shine. At that exact moment, a tidal wave of intense emotions flooded Cheta's heart. Pure happiness, overwhelming relief, and tears of deep gratitude. For years she had worried day and night about her bleak future, knowing how notoriously difficult it was for jobless graduates to secure employment in the city without corrupt connections. And now, out of nowhere, her breakthrough had arrived. Tears began to glisten in her beautiful eyes. Thank you so much, sir. God bless you abundantly. You don't know how much this means to my life. Chuba smiled gently. You do not need to thank me, Cheta. You earned this entirely through your extraordinary intellect and your unparalleled kindness to my mother. He brought out an elegant, gold-embossed business card and handed it to her. We will be leaving for the city tomorrow morning. Take this card. The moment your final passing out parade is done, call me immediately. Cheta collected the card with trembling hands, holding it like a piece of precious diamond. I will definitely call you, sir. Thank you. That evening, as Cheta walked back to her small, dilapidated schoolroom, her heart felt lighter than it had since her parents passed away. Hope had finally returned. The next morning, Chuba and Delucci packed their luxury bags and drove out of the village in their black Hilux truck, while Mama Adaku happily returned to her beloved simple mud hut. Months flew by quickly, and Cheta's NYSC service year officially came to an end. Holding her discharge certificate proudly, she sat on her small bed and dialed the number on Chuba's business card. After a few tense rings, Chuba answered warmly, remembering her instantly. He instructed her to travel down to the beautiful city of Asaba and submit her corporate CV directly to the Human Resources Department at the company's towering headquarters, promising that he had already briefed the HR manager. Cheta was ecstatic. Using her meticulously saved monthly allowances, she traveled to Asaba the very next day, rented a modest one-room apartment, and successfully submitted her documents. Within a week, she passed the rigorous panel interview with flying colors, displaying her brilliant first-class intellect, and was immediately hired with a massive starting salary that made her weep with joy. But unknown to the innocent, ecstatic Cheta, dark clouds were rapidly gathering over her new life. DeLucci, who held the incredibly powerful position of Chief Operating Officer, CEO within Chuba's multi-million naira company, discovered Cheta's newly approved employee file on her desk. The moment her eyes fell upon the name Cheta, her face twisted into an expression of pure, unadulterated hatred. All the buried jealousy from the village exploded back into her heart. This miserable village rat has actually dared to follow us to the city, DeLucci hissed maliciously, slamming the file shut. She thinks she can use her fake innocence to crawl into Chuba's company and eventually take my place as his wife. I will never allow it. DeLucci immediately began a vicious, calculated campaign of psychological warfare and sabotage against Cheta. She started dropping toxic, poisonous seeds of doubt into Chuba's mind during their private corporate meetings. Chuba, DeLucci would say with a calculated, fake look of concern, I am deeply worried about that girl Cheta you brought from the village. I have been reviewing her department, and I honestly feel she does not value this job at all. Because you gave it to her so easily without her begging or struggling, she treats her corporate duties with complete levity. She is lazy and slow. Chuba defended Cheta firmly at first, stating that she was a brilliant first-class graduate who had earned the opportunity through her pure character. But DeLucci did not stop. She ordered her submanagers to overload Cheta with impossible, confusing tasks, and then she turned around and lied to Chuba, claiming Cheta was failing miserably and delaying important company projects. DeLucci's constant, daily poisonous complaints began to chip away at Chuba's confidence, making his mind incredibly heavy with confusion. Realizing that simple complaints were not working fast enough to get Cheta fired, the evil DeLucci decided to hatch a devastating, final plot to completely destroy Cheta's life forever. 2 weeks later, a catastrophic crisis rocked the entire company. A staggering sum of 20 million naira, meant to fund a massive new project expansion, completely vanished from the company's secure bank accounts. The entire corporate board went into a state of absolute panic. External forensic auditors were immediately brought in to trace the digital footprint of the massive illegal transfer. After days of intensive hacking and digital tracking, the auditors emerged with a definitive, shocking report. The massive illegal transfer had been approved and executed using the exact secure computer workstation and the unique personal login credentials belonging to none other than Cheta. When Chuba saw the digital evidence on the screen, a blind, raging fury took over his entire body. He slammed his fist on the desk, his heart breaking in deep betrayal. DeLucci stood beside him, maintaining a flawless, fake look of sadness while celebrating an absolute victory in her wicked heart. An emergency disciplinary board meeting was called instantly, and a terrified, trembling Cheta was brought into the grand boardroom. As the auditors presented the damning digital logs, Cheta stood up, tears streaming down her pale face, her voice shaking violently. I swear by the Almighty God who created me, I know absolutely nothing about this missing money. I have never seen this fraudulent account in my entire life. I am a woman of integrity. I could never steal. But DeLucci cut her off with a sharp, thunderous, and vicious scream. Shut your lying mouth, you ungrateful thief. Your fake village innocence is finally over. You used your cheap charms to deceive an old woman and crawl into this company just to rob us blind. When the digital evidence doesn't lie. The biased board members murmured in agreement, and Cheta was slapped with an immediate indefinite suspension without pay, ordered to vacate the premises immediately. As Cheta packed her small handbag at her desk, weeping uncontrollably, Chuba walked into her office, his face like stone, his eyes filled with pure ice. He looked at her with deep, unadulterated disappointment. I am utterly disgusted by you, Cheta, he said, his voice dripping with venom. My innocent elderly mother trusted you with her entire life, and I gave you a glorious future out of gratitude. And this grand betrayal is how you decide to pay us back? You are a wolf in sheep's clothing. Cheta grabbed his arm, sobbing hysterically. Please, Mr. Chuba, I beg you in the name of God, listen to me. I am being set up. I am completely innocent. But Chuba violently shook his arm away, pointing to the door. Get out of my company right now, before I have the police drag you away in handcuffs. The devastating words shattered Cheta's soul into a million pieces. She collapsed into her small apartment that night, crying until her eyes became bloodshot, her entire future completely ruined, facing the horrific threat of imminent arrest and imprisonment for a crime she knew absolutely nothing about, while the wicked DeLucci celebrated her flawless, evil victory in her luxury mansion. For 2 agonizing weeks, Cheta lived in a state of absolute nightmare inside her small, dark apartment. The vibrant, brilliant young woman who had graduated with a first-class degree was now reduced to a shadow of herself, weeping day and night on her small bed. Her heart was shattered by the sheer crushing weight of the injustice she was facing. She had done nothing but show pure, unconditional love to an elderly woman in the village. Yet here she was, branded a common criminal, a manipulative thief, and an ungrateful opportunist. The devastating words Chuba had spat at her echoed in her mind constantly, cutting deeper than any physical blade. Every single time a car drove past her building, her body would shake violently with terror, fearing that the police had finally come to drag her away to a cold prison cell. She prayed with hot, unceasing tears, clutching her chest, asking God to expose the hidden hands that had orchestrated her downfall. Meanwhile, back at the magnificent company headquarters, DeLucci was walking through the corridors like an absolute queen, basking in the glory of her seemingly flawless victory. In her mind, the pesky village rat had been permanently crushed and discarded, never to return. She spent her days aggressively planning how she would completely take over Chuba's multi-million naira business empire once they got married, feeling utterly untouchable. But what the arrogant, wicked DeLucci completely forgot was that the wheels of justice and karma turn slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. Unknown to her, the company's internal security team and the external forensic auditors had not stopped working. Because of the massive sum of 20 million naira involved, they began an incredibly deep, microscopic investigation into the digital systems, refusing to leave any stone unturned. A few days later, a breakthrough occurred that would shake the entire company to its very foundation. An elderly woman named Mama Janet, who had worked as a humble night cleaner in the corporate headquarters for over 10 years, walked fearfully but resolutely into the private office of the head of the investigation team. Mama Janet was a quiet woman who swept the offices late at night when all the executives had gone home. With trembling hands, she looked at the investigators and said in a shaky voice, "Sir, I have been carrying a heavy burden in my heart for 2 weeks. The night before the 20 million naira went missing, I saw something very strange, and I need to show it to you." The investigators immediately sat up, adjusting their recording equipment. Mama Janet explained that, on that fateful night, around 11 p.m., she was sweeping the long hallway near the administrative department. Suddenly, she saw a figure slipping quietly into Cheta's office. It was highly unusual because Cheta had closed for the day at 5 p.m. Out of curiosity and fear, Mama Janet had crawled closer in the shadows, peeking through the glass window. To her absolute shock, she saw Mrs. DeLucci, the chief operating officer, sitting comfortably at Cheta's desk. DeLucci had a small piece of paper in her hand, which contained Cheta's unique login credentials and password, information that DeLucci had subtly stolen from the HR database using her high-level administrative access. Mama Janet watched in disbelief as DeLucci logged into Cheta's system, typed furiously for several minutes, and authorized a massive hidden financial transfer. Knowing how wicked and powerful DeLucci was, Mama Janet knew that if she just spoke out without evidence, she would be fired or even killed. So, she did something incredibly brave. She brought out her old smartphone, stabilized her hands, and recorded a crystal-clear, 2-minute video through the glass window, capturing DeLucci's face, the computer screen, and the exact timestamp of the fraudulent transaction. When Mama Janet handed over her phone and the investigators pressed play, the room went dead silent. The video footage was absolute, undeniable, and devastating proof. The real culprit was not the poor village teacher. It was the elegant, highly educated chief operating officer and future wife of the CEO. The investigators immediately escalated the video to the cybercrime division of the police, who concurrently ran a deep trace on the strange bank account that had received the stolen 20 million naira. Within 48 hours, the police tracked down the bank account holder to a luxury apartment in the heart of the city. They launched a surprise raid and arrested a young man named Marcus. At first, Marcus tried to play smart, aggressively shouting and threatening the officers. But the moment he was thrown into a cold interrogation room and presented with the digital transaction logs linking his personal account directly to DeLucci's corporate system, his arrogance completely evaporated. He broke down in a sweating panic, shaking like a leaf, and confessed everything. Marcus revealed a shocking, sinister truth that blew the case wide open. He and DeLucci had been secret, passionate lovers for over 3 years, long before Chuba even met her. Their entire relationship with Chuba was a massive, highly coordinated gold-digging scam. DeLucci had never loved Chuba for a single day. She saw him only as a wealthy Muga, a giant money machine to be milked dry. Marcus confessed that they had originally planned to execute a hostile corporate takeover to completely seize Chuba's business empire. But when that failed due to strict board regulations, they decided to embezzle the 20 million naira to fund a lavish escape to an overseas country. DeLucci had deliberately targeted Cheta for the frame-up because she hated how Chuba and Mama Adaku constantly praised the village girl's purity and hard work. And she wanted to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, steal this massive wealth, and destroy the innocent girl who threatened her position. Equipped with the undeniable video evidence and Marcus's full, signed confession, the police and the executive board members immediately coordinated a trap. They decided to expose the wicked antagonist at the absolute peak of her pride. The next morning, Chuba, whose mind was completely oblivious to the discovery, was sitting in the grand boardroom presiding over a high-stakes emergency meeting with all the major international investors and board directors. DeLucci sat right beside him, dressed in an incredibly expensive, glittering corporate suit, tossing her long hair and smiling arrogantly as she confidently presented a fake financial report. She looked the very definition of success, power, and untouchable wealth. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the boardroom were violently thrown open. The entire room went silent as 2 stern-faced, high-ranking police detectives walked inside, followed closely by the forensic investigators and the humble night cleaner, Mama Janet. DeLucci's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly forced a calm, arrogant expression on her face, slamming her pen on the marble table. What is the meaning of this absolute disruption? Security, drag these people out immediately. We are in the middle of an international board meeting. Chuba stood up, completely confused. Detectives, what is going on here? The lead detective stepped forward, his eyes locked on to DeLucci with absolute coldness. Mr. Chuba, we are here to officially arrest the mastermind behind the theft of your 20 million naira. DeLucci instantly let out a loud, dramatic, and wicked laugh, pointing her long, painted acrylic nails into the air. Well, you are late. The thief has already been caught and suspended. Her name is Cheta, a miserable, ungrateful village girl we tried to help. Go to her house and lock her up in jail. The detective did not blink. We are not here for Cheta, madam. We are here for you. In an instant, the air inside the luxurious boardroom turned into pure ice. DeLucci's arrogant smile froze on her face, her eyes widening in a sudden spike of panic. What? Are you insane? I am the chief operating officer of this conglomerate. I am the fiancé of the CEO. How dare you accuse me of such garbage? The lead investigator stepped forward and connected a secure laptop to the massive projector screen on the wall. Let the evidence speak for itself. He pressed play. Suddenly, a massive, towering video broadcasted onto the wall. The entire boardroom gasped in absolute horror. There, on the screen, for all the international investors, directors, and Chuba to see, was a crystal-clear video of DeLucci sitting at Cheta's desk late at night, nefariously typing in the stolen passwords and authorizing the illegal 20 million naira transfer. DeLucci's face on the video was fully visible, illuminated by the computer glow, wearing a malicious, evil smirk. If that wasn't enough, the detective brought out a large tape recorder and pressed play. Marcus's terrified voice echoed through the high-end speakers, fully detailing their 3-year secret love affair, their intense hatred for Chuba, and their elaborate, wicked plan to frame the innocent Cheta and run away with the company's wealth. The exposure was absolute, brutal, and terrifyingly public. The entire boardroom erupted into a state of total chaos and loud murmurs of disgust. Chuba stood there, completely paralyzed, his face turning pale as ashes, his breath caught in his throat. He looked at the projector screen, then looked at the woman sitting beside him, his mind completely shattering into a million pieces. The heavy, agonizing truth hit him like a physical blow to the stomach. The woman he loved, the woman he bought an engagement ring for, was a literal monster who had been plotting his total ruin from the very first day. DeLucci exploded into a state of blind, hysterical panic. The sophisticated, calm city girl completely disappeared, replaced by a desperate, sweating criminal. She jumped up from her chair, knocking over her glass of water, her expensive makeup running down her face as sweat poured from her forehead. No, no, this is a lie. This is a massive setup. That video is completely fake. It was generated by my enemies. Chuba, my love, please listen to me. I love you with all my heart. You know I can never do this to you. That village girl Cheta must have paid the cleaner to fake this video. Chuba, please protect me. She fell to her knees, aggressively grabbing Chuba's expensive trousers, weeping and screaming like a madwoman, her long synthetic nails digging into his clothes. But Chuba looked down at her with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust and absolute hatred. The illusion was permanently shattered. He violently kicked her hands away from his body, stepping back as if she were a venomous snake. Do not dare touch me with your filthy criminal hands, DeLucci. You are a despicable, disgusting monster. You completely deceived me, you insulted my mother, and you almost destroyed the life of an absolute angel who did nothing but show us pure kindness. I cast you out of my life permanently. The lead detective stepped forward, grabbed DeLucci by her hair and shoulders, pulled her up brutally from the floor, and slammed her hands into heavy, cold iron handcuffs. DeLucci, you are officially under arrest for corporate grand theft, fraud, criminal conspiracy, and defamation of character. You have the right to remain silent. DeLucci screamed hysterically, thrashing around, her expensive jewelry scattering on the floor, her synthetic nails snapping and bleeding as she was publicly dragged out of the grand boardroom, crying and howling in deep humiliation, fully exposed in front of the very people she had looked down upon with intense pride. Justice had triumphed completely, and the wicked antagonist had been utterly dismantled in a matter of minutes. Following the explosive unmasking and public disgrace of DeLucci in the corporate boardroom, the toxic cloud of deceit that had hung over the company finally dissolved, giving way to the brilliant light of truth. Chuba sat alone in his executive office for hours, his hands buried in his face as a profound wave of guilt washed over his soul. The heavy words of his elderly mother, Mama Adaku, echoed relentlessly in his mind. My son, I know that girl very well. She is not a thief. Someone is lying. He realized with devastating clarity how easily he had been blinded by superficial beauty and sophisticated city lies, and how brutally he had crushed the spirit of an innocent, pure-hearted young woman who had saved his mother from a life of dangerous labor. He knew that an official corporate apology letter from the HR department was not nearly enough to heal the deep wounds he had inflicted. Early the next morning, Chuba took Cheta's employee file, drove straight to her modest neighborhood, and walked down the narrow path toward her small apartment. When he knocked, the door opened slowly to reveal Cheta. Her eyes were still puffy and bloodshot from days of endless weeping, her face pale, yet her posture remained dignified. Before she could even utter a polite greeting, Chuba fell completely to his knees right there on the dusty concrete corridor, tears of deep remorse streaming down his face. Cheta, please, I beg you in the name of the Almighty God, forgive me, Chuba wept, his voice cracking with immense pain. I was a fool. I was completely blinded by a monster, and I accused an absolute angel of a crime she knew nothing about. The truth is fully out. DeLucci has been arrested, her lover has confessed, and the entire world now knows your hands are completely clean. Please do not let my terrible mistakes ruin the bright future you worked so hard to achieve. Cheta stood there, stunned into absolute silence as she watched the powerful, multi-millionaire CEO kneel at her feet in total humility. Her kind, compassionate heart, which had been forged through years of personal loss and struggle, could not harbor malice. She gently reached down, held Chuba by his hands, and urged him to stand up. Please stand up, mister. Chuba, she said softly, a tear of relief escaping her eye. I have already forgiven you. I knew that as long as there is a God in heaven, my innocence would eventually speak for me. Chuba stood up, wiping his eyes, looking at her with a level of respect and reverence he had never shown another human being. He immediately presented her with an official, golden-sealed contract. Not only was she completely reinstated into the company with immediate effect, but the executive board had unanimously promoted her to the exalted position of chief operating officer, the very seat the wicked DeLucci had used to oppress her. Her new salary was tripled, accompanied by a luxury company car, a beautiful furnished townhouse in the wealthiest estate in the city, and massive international stock options. Her life had completely transformed overnight, proving that when karma decides to reward a clean heart, it does so in a grand, undeniable fashion. A few days later, a beautiful luxury convoy drove down the dusty, bumpy road leading into the distant village of Quail. The villagers gathered along the path, whispering in absolute awe as a pristine white Range Rover stopped directly in front of Mama Adaku's humble compound. The door opened, and Cheta stepped out, looking absolutely radiant, dressed in a stunning high-end traditional outfit, her face glowing with genuine happiness. Mama Adaku stood outside her hut, leaning on her walking stick. The moment her old eyes fell upon Cheta, she dropped her stick and stretched out her arms. Cheta ran into her embrace, and the two women wept tears of pure joy, holding each other tightly. Chuba stepped out of the vehicle as well, smiling warmly at the beautiful sight. Cheta had not come back to the village just to visit. She had come to fulfill a sacred promise of love. She looked at the old woman and said, "Mama, your days of fetching water from the stream and living in a lonely, broken hut are permanently over. You are coming to live with me in the city, in a home filled with laughter, love, and absolute comfort." Mama Adaku looked up at the sky, her voice cracking with deep emotion as she raised her hands in prayer. "I told you, my beautiful daughter, that good people may suffer for a short time, but one day your goodness will speak for you in high places." One simple bucket of water at the riverbank changed our lives forever. The final consequences for the wicked antagonists were swift, brutal, and completely unyielding. DeLucci and her lover Marcus were dragged before a strict federal high court. With the crystal-clear video evidence provided by the brave night cleaner, Mama Janet, who was also heavily rewarded by Chuba with a massive cash bonus and a luxurious retirement package, and the detailed bank tracking logs, the judge showed absolutely no mercy. DeLucci and Marcus were convicted on all counts of grand corporate theft, criminal conspiracy, and malicious defamation. They were sentenced to 15 years of hard labor in a maximum security prison without the option of a fine. Every single asset DeLucci had deceitfully acquired, her designer clothes, her expensive jewelry, her bank accounts, and her luxury city apartment, was completely confiscated by the state to balance the company's legal fees. She was stripped of her pride, her elite social status, and her freedom, forced to spend her youth wearing a coarse prison uniform, scrubbing concrete floors with the very nails she had fiercely protected from dishwater. Her ungrateful, malicious life had collapsed into total ruin, a textbook example of harsh, unyielding karma. This emotional and gripping story carries a profound, eternal philosophical lesson for everyone watching across the world. Never look down on anyone because of their current situation, and never tire of showing unconditional kindness, for you might be entertaining an angel in disguise. Cheta helped a frail, elderly village woman without expecting a single kobo or a token of appreciation in return. She did it out of the pure, unadulterated depth of her human empathy, and in return, that single seed of genuine kindness grew into a massive tree of destiny that completely uprooted her from poverty, saved her from future joblessness, and elevated her to the absolute pinnacle of corporate success. Meanwhile, DeLucci, who operated with intense pride, arrogance, greed, and a total lack of empathy, discovered too late that the universe never sleeps. Wealth obtained through deceit and the destruction of innocent people will always crumble into ash, leaving the villain in absolute shame and desolation. Justice may delay, but it will surely arrive with a thunderous impact. Dear lovely viewers,